One of the stunning images from the riots yesterday and the people invading the U.S. Capitol shows Capitol Police pointing guns at a door as protesters tried to burst into the House chambers. I want to draw your attention to the middle of this photo. In a blue shirt and a Texas flag mask is U.S. Representative and a former sheriff from the great state of Texas, Representative Nehls. He was trying to negotiate with the mob as the Capitol Police attempted to keep them at bay with that piece of furniture in front of the door. This is a chilling image that really has gone out all across the world. Congressman Troy Nehls, thank you for joining us to talk about what happened yesterday. I've got a lot of questions for you, starting with what was going through your mind in that moment.
Well, good afternoon, Marnie. It was really a shocking display of, just violent protesting. We were all called. There was the opening session of Congress was at like 1 o'clock. And we were there to have meaningful debate over the issue of the day. And within an hour or so, what I noticed is that there were many personnel, uniformed police personnel, as well as plainclothes personnel. They all of a sudden swarmed into the House chamber and approached Speaker Pelosi and whisked her away out the back hallway. The uniformed personnel then were there to help secure the doors. And there are many, many entrances leading into the House floor, as well as the gallery up on top. And it took many, many personnel to secure all those entrances. We were told, the members of Congress were told to just remain in our place and take a seat, and which many of us did. And then a few minutes later, an announcement was made that the Capitol building, the Capitol, has been breached, and there are protesters in the rotunda area. And that was just a shock. You could almost sense the fear and the anxiety with the personnel inside the House chamber. And then just moments later, I was at the center door. And that center door, those two doors in that photo, are the doors where the President of the United States would walk through when he is addressing the joint session for the State of the Union. And so those doors go right down the middle of the House floor. And that's where I was positioned. And I tell you something, the doors were locked, but boy, oh boy, when those protesters hit those doors, they were kicking them, they were hitting them hard. Their intent was to breach those two doors and then disrupt and enter the House chamber. And I just couldn't allow that to happen.
Representative, you were wearing two hats yesterday, newly elected to Congress from the state of Texas, but you also have 25 years as law enforcement experience as a sheriff. Which hat were you wearing in that moment?
Well, I'm an old retired military officer, and yes, I have almost 30 years of law enforcement. So it was just natural instinct to me to do what I did. I don't, there are people that are saying, no, you and other members from a Texas delegation and another congressman, Markwayne Mullins, they were heroes. I don't think any of us would look at that. We just took action, and it was just a natural instinct for me to help augment, so to speak, the Capitol Hill police, those gentlemen that were on my left and right with their guns drawn, pointing their weapons at those protesters. I was just there to assist them. And I said, hey, listen, I'm an old Texas sheriff, and I'll be here to help you. You are my brothers and sisters in law enforcement, and I'll never forget where I came from. And so I was there, and they attempted several times, the secret security police or whoever they were, they said, sir, you have to leave this chamber. You have to go. And I said, no, I'm not leaving. I'm staying right here.
In fact, you said, I was proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Capitol Police, barricading that entrance to our sacred House chamber while trying to calm the situation, talking to the protesters. So through that little sliver of a hole in the glass that had been broken through, you can see a face on the other side. What was that person and the crowd saying, and what were you trying to negotiate to them?
You know, one day I would like to meet that young man. He appeared to be maybe in his early 20s and 25, 30 years old, and he was angry. You could see it in his eyes. He said to me, he said, "You have that Texas mask on. You should be with us. What are you doing?" And I said, "Young man, this is not the way we conduct business. You do not resort to violence. We should be able to agree to disagree. But you have breached the Capitol grounds. You have overcome Capitol Hill police. We've had police officers that have been hurt. And then you've entered the Capitol and you've destroyed, you've broken windows, and their behavior was unacceptable." I told that young man, I said, "What you are doing is un-American, and we should be better than this." I told him, they said, "Get away from the door, go back. We do not handle our differences this way." But I could just see in his eyes, as well as some of the other protesters, that they were very, very angry. These were very, very angry people.
And many of us are just looking at that image, and you recounting that story makes the hair on my arm stand up. What happened in those moments? What was his response? How did that altercation come to an end?
Well, obviously, I didn't get my way. I mean, I did everything I could to try to diffuse the situation. In law enforcement, we say we have to de-escalate it, and I did my best. Just having some conversation, I said, "Please, do not keep trying to breach this door. There are individuals on the other side that have weapons. Those weapons have been drawn. Those Capitol Hill police and those officers, whatever agency they work for, did a great job. They were giving the individuals verbal commands saying, 'Do not try to breach this door.'" I don't know if they wanted to hear any of it. I do believe that our chamber, the House floor, House of Representatives, was never breached. They did a fantastic job keeping the protesters out, and it was an honor and a privilege for me to stand there with them, doing everything I could to protect that sacred floor, that sacred chamber, the United States House of Representatives.
And we all know that you and your colleagues were able to reconvene in the chamber again until late in the night last night. What did it mean to be back in that space together and continuing the work at hand?
You know, I'm glad we were able to. I thought it was a great call that we continued business. We should never let a mob or a group of individuals, violent protesters, ever stop our government from conducting business. But when I walked into the chamber and I noticed the broken glass and some of the marks on the wall and some of the damage that was caused, it saddened me. Quite honestly, I said, "Is this the United States of America? Is this where we should be today?" I thought it was a black eye on our institution. I think that the individuals that entered the Capitol building should be ashamed of themselves. I think what they did was criminal, and I think they should be identified and they should be prosecuted, because this isn't the message we should be sending to the younger people in our country. That if you don't agree with something or you're not getting your way, what we should do is just jump out on the streets, which I'm okay with peaceful protests. But what we've seen for 10 months is let's just take over several city blocks and occupy it, as they did in Seattle. Or let's go to Baltimore and loot and burn buildings. Or let's do what we did in our nation's capital several months ago and pretty much just shut the entire city down. It seems to me that is the norm today. What we saw yesterday was the same type of behavior, and that should not be the new norm. This was embarrassing for America. The world is watching. Our younger people, our younger children are watching this, and this isn't the type of behavior that they should be taught or they should be seeing on our nightly news just about every day of the week for the past 10 months.
Congressman, it was striking to me. One of our reporters was talking to people outside of the Capitol before this chaos ensued, and also interviewing people while it was happening about why they were there. And they interviewed a number of people who believed that their presence there yesterday and their actions would result in overturning the results of the election and in end, halting the process. Now, you and your colleagues were inside the chamber going through that motion to certify the electoral votes. You were one of the lawmakers objecting to the count, saying, quote, "You sent me to Congress to fight for President Trump and election integrity, and that is exactly what I'm doing." The chaos then ensued. We applaud your efforts and the Capitol Police for what you did. After that, though, there are critics who say that you and a number of your Texas colleagues went back into the chamber and you remained steadfast in your promise to object to the electoral votes. Your response to their criticism, and some even calling for you all to step down now as a result of what happened late in the night last night?
Well, number one, that's not going to happen. I objected to Arizona and I objected to Pennsylvania. I knew all along that objecting to those two states was not going to change the result. But I had to do what I felt was right and protect our nation's Constitution and do everything I can to protect elections, whether they're local, state, and federal, in the future. And what I saw in those two states, with the legislature creating election laws, which they should, and enforce, what we saw in those two states is either secretaries of states or governors or even mayors changing some of those election laws, whether it was done through ballot by mail, whether it wasn't verifying signatures on ballots that were received. And so I objected to those two states. I knew before I made those votes that it was very unlikely to change the outcome. But again, this isn't the last time we are going to disagree on things. I mean, it's not the first, it's not the last. But my point is this isn't the way we should handle and conduct ourselves when we have differences. What will be the next major issue in America where our nation, our people are almost divided? It's almost like a 50-50. Are we going to resort to this type of tactic where we just start demonstrating and then we start getting physically violent and pass police barricades, overcome police lines, and enter buildings? I mean, it was police stations in Seattle months ago and other buildings and private businesses in Washington, D.C. several months ago. And now yesterday, our nation's capital. Is this what we should expect from the American people? Is this what we should expect? This is the new norm now, is that we should just start getting violent to get our point across. And I think it's un-American. It's not healthy. It's very dangerous, is what you saw yesterday.
Congressman, I'll move on. Pardon me, I'll move on from this, but I wanted to point out just one word you used. And I think at this point, you know, in having these healthy and nonviolent discussions and disagreements, you use the word unlikely in overturning the electoral votes. That's not true. I mean, it wasn't possible yesterday. It was a ceremonial process. And so when words matter and the people outside the Capitol heard the word unlikely, do you not think that they felt that there was a chance that their actions could assist their lawmakers inside that Capitol in doing what the president said that they thought they were able to do? The word unlikely, I think, does it not fuel the fire?
No, I don't know. I don't believe so. All I do know is this, is I wasn't out there polling every 435 members of Congress. All I did is what I felt was right. All the different members of Congress had to make a decision, their own internal decision, looking at what they felt was right, how they each one of them, how they interpreted the Constitution. And what I interpreted and how I interpret the Constitution is what took place in those two states was wrong and it violated the Constitution. And that's my point. There are others that felt and don't agree with me. And I respect that decision. But that doesn't mean I'm going to cross over to the other side of the aisle and hit him in the nose.
Did it cross your mind? Did it cross your mind not to object after what had happened?
No, it didn't, because that's, again, so if we have rioting in the future, are we going to let mobs now determine how we as members of Congress or any other elected official, how we should vote? The larger the mob, the more they're going to try to convince you to see it their way. I don't think that's healthy. So I should let a group of people, I don't know how many people entered the Capitol building. Do you have an idea how many entered this building?
Well, from watching outside, it looked like it could have been a few hundred to 1,000, potentially more.
So do you believe that a congressman should allow 100 or 200 people to now totally take my vote and flip it because they are against, they committed some very violent acts in here. They committed criminal mischief. They broke windows. I cannot allow a small mob or even a large mob start dictating to us how we should vote. That's if they want to get their point across, they should do it in a civil manner, not entering the House floor or entering the hallway and trying to breach the doors leading into the House floor. So no, I don't believe that. All I do know is this: in less than 2 weeks, we have President-elect Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January 20th. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do what's in the best interests of the American people. And I am honored and privileged. This is an honor and a privilege for me to represent Texas's 22nd district.
And to answer your question, because I think there was one in there for me, no, I'm not here to tell you what I think about it. And I do believe that we can all agree what happened yesterday was disgraceful and wrong. But my job is to ask the questions, and I think that people want to hear from you. I do want to get your thoughts on the calls of invoking the 25th Amendment or impeaching President Trump. Those calls are growing louder, Congressman. Where do you and your Republican colleagues stand on that matter today, January 7th?
I haven't spoken to my other colleagues, and all I do know is we're less than 2 weeks from President-elect Joe Biden being inaugurated, and I think that's what should take place. I believe President Trump sent out some information that we want to see a smooth transition of power now over the next 2 weeks, and I think that's exactly the way this should be handled.